Welcome everyone. You're listening to the ICCA India Podcast. Through the podcast series, we hope to bring out multidisciplinary dialogues by discussing the intersections of economics, policy, and cancer. Hello everyone. We have the great pleasure of having Dr. Chakrabarty with us for the Innovations in Cancer Care in Africa podcast. I am Ujasvi from the ICCA research team, and through this podcast, we aim to carry out the discussion on cancer care and bring it out to a wider range of audience. So thank you for tuning with us. Dr. Chakrabarty, could you please introduce yourself with an insight on your training, different organizations, roles, specializations, and so on?
All right. Thank you, Ujasvi, for giving me the opportunity to do this podcast. I am born and brought up in Kolkata. So I did my bachelor's in chemistry and master's in biochemistry from Calcutta University. And then I did my PhD from University of Missouri, Columbia, under the guidance of Dr. R. Michael Roberts, who is a very well-known figure or scientist, I should say, in the field of early embryo development, especially in large animal species. In US, research on large animal species is very important because those are used for dairy, cattle industry, meat industry, and so on. My specialization in my PhD was molecular biology, but my topic of thesis was deciphering the dialogue between the mother and the fetus during very early in pregnancy. This is very important for the pregnancy to be initiated and maintained. From there, I moved to Vanderbilt to do postdoctoral fellowship in Dr. Sudhanshu Kumar Dey, SK Dey, we call him. And there also I continued on the same field of area where I studied how the microRNAs, a very small type of RNA entity, which are very important in regulation of gene expression, how the microRNAs control very early stage of pregnancy. But Dr. S.K. Dey actually left for University of Cincinnati. So at that time, my dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and I also lost him by that time. And happened to be my mother also was diagnosed with oral cancer. It's kind of felt like a call for me to, contribute to something which will impact some point of time for the care of cancer patients. So Vanderbilt was an excellent space for that because it has a very strong hematology oncology program, right? It's a medical center also. So I joined the lab of Dr. Carlos Artiega, who worked on anti-cancer drugs, especially in the field of breast cancer. So after that, I spent there for nearly 5 years. And in 2014, I was awarded this Ramalinga Goswami Fellowship by DBT India. And then I moved with a permanent faculty position in Shiv Nadar University. From there, I started my journey of running my own lab and running my own teaching program.
That has been quite a journey, and I'm sure that working on this would have been insightful for you. So could you tell us a little about your lab research and what would constitute success in your research areas?
As I said, when I moved to Dr. Carlos Artiega's lab, I started studying anti-cancer drugs which are used for breast cancer treatment. Now, very precisely, the goal of the lab is to study the mechanism of anti-cancer drug resistance. Now, most of us think, like as a general person, most of us in the general public think that we do not have enough drugs to treat cancer. That is at all not the case. We have so many of them. The problem is a majority of them actually fail. Even though in the very beginning, the patient shows very good response, eventually a majority of the drugs actually fail because of development of resistance. And this happens as a natural phenomenon. There is no way you can stop it. It's more like bombarding a species with a pollutant type of thing. So eventually some member of the species actually will develop resistance and survive, right? Cancers are like that. So understanding the mechanism of anti-cancer drug resistance is very necessary. Then we can predict beforehand how the drug should be administered, which combination the drug should be administered, at what point of disease the drug should be administered. Because cancer is not a static disease, it's a progressive disease. Progressive doesn't necessarily mean that it increases in size. It means that it changes all the time. Like somebody diagnosed with breast cancer 1 month ago is not necessarily the same monster today. So understanding how the drug should be administered is a key for actually curing the disease. And anti-cancer drug resistance, understanding the mechanism of resistance is very important, not only at the laboratory level, but also for real life, treatment. So I started my career with that, but after some time I understood some more important aspects that we should be looking at in terms of anti-cancer drugs, especially in the field of breast cancer, is how the drugs cause toxicity. Toxicity is a big problem. There is no scarcity of drug, but a lot of drugs are actually withdrawn because of the tremendous amount of toxicity the patient develops, even after some time of treatment course. That I started doing it with some excellent collaborative effort with people who are trained in molecular toxicology and drug metabolism. And another area of research that I also started working on is making a screening platform. And I'm talking about serious screening, not just, just by doing very base level of screening, especially for screening the huge repertoire of these natural products we have in India, those things. So basically right now, so what we are doing, 3 things. We are still studying the mechanism of anti-cancer drug resistance. In the process, we also get to know the mode of action of anti-cancer drugs, the true mode of action of anti-cancer drugs, not just, superficial way. And second thing we are doing, how the anti-cancer drugs are causing toxicity. And the third thing we are looking at building a very robust screening platform for screening the natural products. Now, our screening platform is, the beauty is this is a 3-dimensional. Even you don't have the actual human patient, if you can take the patient sample and grow them in laboratory petri dish in a 3-dimensional manner, just the way the tumor grows in the body, then you can study them in more relevant way than just, putting the cells on a flat petri dish and studying them. So that's the last thing we are trying to build.
The thing which really struck me was that how you said that it is important that when we talk about anti-cancer drug resistance, it should reach not only laboratories, but in real life as well, people who are actually going through cancer. How far have we reached? As in real life, is it true that most people are aware about this, or most people are getting treated for anti-cancer drug resistance, or is it at its initial stages where it's now spreading and now people are starting to know about this?
Cancer patients and their families, I doubt they know about anti-cancer drug resistance. So most people take cancer as like a death sentence. There are 2 types of reactions. One is there's no treatment for this disease. That's why it's considered as a death sentence. And second is, even there are treatments, it does not work. So the second group thinks that, well, it's not that we do not have enough drugs, it's just no drug works for anybody. And the first group thinks that, well, this is an untreatable disease. There is no drug for it. But actually, as I said, in reality, we have plenty of drugs. It's not that the drugs don't work. It's just we don't know how exactly to make the drug works. And that differs from one patient to the other patient, even if both patients have the same breast cancer. So in US or in westernized countries where the anti-cancer drug research is actually been going on for very, very long time, and it's still ongoing because I said it's a problem and it's an evolving mechanism. So you have to keep following it, right? That's where this word personalized treatment has become very important. So current trend, in a very layman's perspective, if I have to tell, is current trend is to sequence the patient's cancer genome, see what kind of, mutations or what kind of genetic changes are there, which is likely contributing to the cancer of the patient. And then design your treatment modality based on that. And sometimes even that is not enough. Because as I said, it's an evolving disease. A cancer 1 month ago not necessarily is the same as today. So for that also, people in westernized countries have started using something called evolutionary therapeutics. What it means that you are tracking the course of evolution of the disease. And I'm talking about real Darwinian evolution. It sounds very fancy, but it is not actually. A lot of my lab research effort, especially the anti-cancer drug resistance, is going into that pathway also. So basically what people are doing, because just combining 2 drugs, 3 drugs, 4 drugs is not enough. So they are basically following the patient using the genomic sequence, the cancer genetic sequence, as an evolutionary disease. So disease is evolving, your treatment modality is also evolving. And they are using hardcore, evolutionary biology principle, sometimes which involved serious mathematics and also some principles of economics like evolutionary game theory, network theory, all these are being used. So that is how people are getting treated in westernized countries. But here, I think still people, general public are not aware of this problem. And because there is a very discordant, very lack of, talk between the scientists, the researchers, as well as the clinicians, because clinicians are too busy. Scientists like me are, all stuck in the, lab, and there is no fine policy or anything, any government, mandate that these 2 groups are supposed to talk to each other. Otherwise, we will not be able to provide better cancer care to our patients. So that lack of that communication, I don't think there is a whole lot of things are going on. Doctors are probably following the course of treatment or the regime that they are learning from US or UK or something like that. But that not necessarily means that this will be applicable for cancer patients in India. Because when I say genome, our genome is not the same as a genome of a Caucasian person. So our disease, the way it will evolve, is not the same way the disease will be evolved in a patient in US or UK.
Yeah, and this does really stress upon why it is more and more important to increase awareness about this as well, so that more research is done on this. And as you said, it is an evolutionary process. It needs to keep on happening.
Yeah. One thing I should also mention, because I forgot to mention, in a lot of countries, I think in India also probably started a little bit, there is a bridge between the clinician and patient by group of people who are called patient advocates. So these are not just, lay people. These people actually talk to the doctor as well as the patient. Their job is to actually advocating the patient, making the patient and the family aware of the disease, aware of the treatment, where the disease might goes to, which is very important for cancer care. So in India, even though, as I said, it might have started, it is like almost non-existing. But in other countries, these patient advocates play a big role, for providing better cancer care.
I think that it's important to fill in the gap of knowledge and information as well. So I get that it's very important. And I'm sure that this should be the case not just between doctors and patients, but also between industry and doctors as well, because
exactly,
even we're looking at the industrial health linkages and we're trying to see how important that is.
Mm-hmm.
The next question which we have for you is that you're trained in molecular biology. So what are the major advances in molecular biology, and how does this help a cancer treatment? So apart from what you've said, is it that there are some other major advances as well which could help a cancer patient?
Yes, the main advance I already told you, so I'm going to repeat and say some more on it. So knowing the human genome. So that is the core advance that has been made in the field of molecular biology. So we now know what a person's cancer genome, a genome of a cancerous tissue from a patient would look like. And we now know that how it would look like from somebody else who has been treated with a drug and showed very good response. So once you know the similarity or difference, that gives you a very good starting point how to start treating the second patient. And you can use this information from one patient to other, one patient to other, one patient to other. So that the personalized treatment, the core of personalized treatment is knowing how the abnormality in the genome of the cancerous tissue is going to affect the progression of the disease and also response to the drug. But unfortunately, that doesn't get transferred from the doctor to the patient, or, general people don't know. It's still considered, people know that cancer genome can be sequenced, but people still consider it as a very expensive process. But the next advantage that the molecular biology has given us is to do this genome sequencing at a very low cost, extremely low cost. So where people have spent trillions of dollars to do the first genome sequences, now people can, spend $100 or maybe even cheaper than that to do the genome sequences. And it gets very quickly done. It does not take like months or years or something like that. So that is the second advancement. Third advancement that I must tell you, that there is a field called liquid biopsy. How the cancer patients are diagnosed. Usually cut a very thin tissue section from the cancerous tissue. I'm talking about solid cancer here. Somebody having a, lump or mass of growth. So usually that is called biopsy or solid biopsy. That is a very invasive process. Not all diagnostic center or, every hospital or health center cannot afford that. This very era of liquid biopsy, you can just take 5 ml or 10 milliliter of blood sample from the patient, collect at any point, any diagnostic center, any health center in India, no matter how rural it is, and just simply transport it in very easy way. You don't also need fancy transport, just ice. Transport is to, more, advanced diagnostic places. And from that 5 ml of blood, you can collect the cancer cell, do the genome sequences, and tell what kind of, treatment the patient might be needing, or what could be the course of the disease for this patient. This is called liquid biopsy. So this is not invasive. This is not very expensive, nothing. And it also gives access of diagnosis and treatment, proper treatment modality for patients who are living in really, really interior area of India. And we know that there is no scarcity of it. Okay, so that is the third molecular biology advancement that has, kind of changed the course of the cancer diagnosis and treatment.
Yes, and I feel that you make a very important point here, talking about costs, the low cost being an important point, because I think generally people also find that cancer treatment is very expensive, and that does become a hurdle apart from whatever social and cultural issues which exist. So what are the bottlenecks in your types of research, which is the research in microbiology or in the study of cells and cancer? And are there any bottlenecks which exist in this space?
Of course. The first bottleneck is, there are multiple of them. I don't want to sound very negative, so I will put it in a very mild way. And when I'm saying this, I'm talking mostly in the perspective of India, right? So number one bottleneck, I know, everybody knows, is the lack of awareness. Cancer is not a stigma. Even the Jurassic period fossils, dinosaur fossils also had cancer. So cancer is not only human disease, it goes on for any life form. So the awareness, so this disease was there, it is with us, in foreseeable future, it will still be there, But what we have to learn is to cure it. The way we cured many communicable diseases, right? The first thing is awareness in general public and serious government input. I feel that government has to jump in to do something to make it a mandate that patient gets some level of education about this disease, because this is one of the topmost of 5 non-communicable diseases at par with heart disease, diabetes, respiratory illness, mental diseases. So if people are getting awareness about those, why not getting awareness of cancer? Why being scared of something which will be with us, which is with us? It's a natural process. It's how our body works. So the second bottleneck is the lack of dialogue between the scientists in academia, scientists in industry, the clinic, and the government. I know the clinicians are very busy, especially in India. The ratio of patient to doctor is very off the chart. In US, probably per 100 patient, there is one cancer doctor available. In India, that number probably goes to tens and thousands. So lack of facility, lack of diagnostic facility, lack of treatment facility, lack of palliative care, lack of proper number of doctors are there. But the problem is also big because there is no dialogue. There is no patient advocate who can tell patient how, what would be the course of the disease. The patient gets scared because of that also. A lot of patients actually drop off the treatment because they don't understand. They think that the treatment is not working. It is never going to work. So what's the point of spending the money? Anyway, it's expensive. But if there was somebody who would have told the patient and patient's family that, wait, this is how it's supposed to look at this point, but I can assure you it's going to get better. So hang in there. That dialogue is not existing. So there is a discordance between what the clinician is doing, who is obviously busy, what the patient is going through. And what government can do is to make it a mandate that any cancer hospital to offer treatment to patient, you need to have something called patient advocate. This is a mandatory. They will look through that the disease is treated in a right, consistent manner. A lot of people actually die of the disease not only because the drug don't work, because they stop the treatment in between. The lack of clinical trial on Indian patient, as I said, our treatment modalities, treatment regime are based on what is happening on US patient or European patient. They are not the same as Indian patient. So we need clinical trials. And when I'm talking about clinical trials, it's not just blind clinical trials, like assigning one drug to one group, assigning a control group or something like that. It's informed clinical trial where we will be getting all the personalized information about patient. So right patient would be given the right drug or combination of drug. So informed clinical trial, again, government has to jump into that. Otherwise, people will be just spending money and not getting any result out of it. Clinician and scientist communities have gone through this. They are still going through this. People now know that personalized, rightly designed clinical trial is key to provide better cancer care. The next thing is utilize the repertory of natural products, not in a mumbo jumbo way, but in an informed way. Lot of treatment that the Ayurvedic doctors back in, centuries ago, they have also treated cancer patients. But they have done it in an informed manner. They probably had that knowledge, how it has to be used, what is the mode of action. So utilize those. It's not just, spending endless amount of money and giving people to, in the name of Ayurvedic research, but do it in a proper way. Mix and match with modern medicine and, mix and match with modern biological techniques. And the last thing I would like to say is an industry has to step in there. It may not be looking like a very profitable business, but unless they support us, it's very difficult for normal being scientists to do expensive research. Industry has to jump in more. In US, the industry and academia work side by side. There are many examples. AstraZeneca, Genentech, Pfizer, these are big cancer, drug developing company. They work side by side with academia. So here in India, you have to have something like that. The last one, I must say, the funding system is non-transparent. Government has to step in there. Government is not spending money at all, but something has to be there, some accountability from the side of the scientists who are taking the money, spending. These are taxpayers' money, right? The tax that you and I and hundreds of different people are paying. So how the money is being spent for good research, for real help for the patients in the all aspects of life, not only from economically blessed families, but especially for people who do not have money, no healthcare, nothing. So some accountability has to be there, some transparency in the funding situation has to be there. So the money given by the government is spent in a right manner.
That really is an important point. And as you also mentioned earlier, many cancer patients also deal mentally with cancer. So support is required for the family and the patients as well. But taking a step back here, we talked about what happens when they are diagnosed with cancer and how they should be treated. What would you have to say when we talk about screening and before they are diagnosed with cancer? Because many people are diagnosed with the disease at a later stage. How can it be that awareness is increased in such a way that they're diagnosed earlier? So chances of better treatment can be increased. So what would you say about that, especially for rural areas as well, not just for the urban areas?
Yeah, the awareness program will actually take care of that. So, for example, simple things. If we chew tobacco or if you smoke, you have a higher chance of getting lung cancer. If you are always drinking, then you will have higher chance of, having liver cancer because of alcohol. If you are not getting your reproductive checks for women especially at right time point, if you do not maintain proper reproductive health, then there is a chance that at some point of time in your life, you will be ending up with some cervical cancer or something like that. So the awareness should definitely pinpoint those issues. Awareness should also talk about, and this government has to do. The same way, they're sending the healthcare workers for family planning. So government has done a lot of stuff in that aspect. Why not that spreading the awareness early on to all people, so that not only the cancer patients and their families and the current scenario are getting help, but also general public also getting help. So they are not just scared. Also, important thing is that if somebody feels that they are getting sick, so the health center should be able to run some simple checks to see whether they are showing some symptom of cancer or having a benign tumor, a tumor which is not spread. So very early stage, which can be taken care of that. That also goes into the awareness program. Other than that, the industry regulation should be in place so that the pollutants, pesticide are not spread everywhere. That goes under, serious government policies. Because we know that there are certain cancer belts in India, like many other countries. So what is being done in there to save the people, right? So government has to talk to industry, make the industries do something so that the waste products goes away. I know this is a problem for every single country in the world, but government has to jump in. That will drastically decrease the number of cancer patients in certain cancer belts and increase the number of doctors, increase the number of, non-doctor caregivers. Those all comes with the awareness program. Also talk about prevention. Nobody talks about prevention. People think cancer is not preventable, but it is a preventable disease. As I said, now lung cancer, if you don't smoke, if you don't chew tobacco, if you take care of your reproductive health, if you don't drink uncontrollably, So these are all preventable. If you eat the proper food, some food really, they have anti-cancer properties. It's known all over in the world. Introduce those food to cheap cost, give heavy government, advertisement for taking those foods. So those kind of things has to be there. So prevention, lot of natural products can also prevent us. We know that. But government has to do the advertisement. People in interior rural area, they are not reading newspaper, they are not following the Twitter, they are not following YouTube. But they will listen to it if government sends a bunch of healthcare workers there and say, well, this is how the disease look like. Anybody can have it, so this is not a social stigma. And this is how you can prevent it. If you feel like suspect that you have some problem, this is where you should go and start the initial talking. There is no need to hide it. So I know what I am saying. It's a big thing. But this will actually take our country in terms of cancer care to the next level. India has done so well in so many aspects. The government has to jump in it. And the industry, all the wealthy foundation has to pitch in there.
The next question which we have is that, are there practical changes in doing science that you would like to see? So bench to bedside is often discussed. So with the kind of work you do, is this framing correct, or how would you like to see it from your perspective?
So practical change is increasing the dialogue between, or even starting the dialogue among the bench scientists, the people in industry who are developing the drug, the clinician who are doing the treatment, the caregivers who are helping the treatment modality and making sure the patient gets the right treatment throughout the process, the government making or mandating the policies. These are required, and this is not a single directional process. So bench to bedside is a bidirectional thing. It's not that we are doing something fancy inside the lab and at the end of the day some cancer patient in TIFR is getting benefited. The story doesn't end there. The story is much more complicated. As I said, it's an evolving disease. So how the patient is responding, that knowledge has to come back to the bench scientist. So it's a bidirectional process. A lot of people have to be involved in there. The flow of information, there has to be some level of document keeping which are accessible to the researcher, to the drug developer, the industries, to the people who are treating the patient, and also probably the government to see who is accountable. These are complicated processes, but these practical changes need to be there. It's not that it's not happening. In many places in the world, this is actually happening. So that is the practical change, and we really should emphasize on doing good science rather than just by increasing the number of publications. So that's something I have noticed here, which is, there is no harm of publishing. It is very important. What you are doing, it's very important to let the world know. It's very important to, let the community know that you are doing something important. But just not do for the sake of increasing the number. When you are engaged in a healthcare research, you need to have that accountability. You owe it to the patient, because at the end of the day, you are taking the patient's money, the taxpayers' money only. So there has to be some accountability, and there has to be some level of conscience from the side of the scientist telling that, well, I have taken this much of government funding and I have done this in real life to make changes in cancer care. So that has to be done. Again, as you can imagine, that requires a lot of complicated accountability has to be there, otherwise it cannot be done.
I think this has been pointed out in previous episodes of the podcast as well, how important it is to focus on the quality of science and how beneficial it is for the end user and how is it impacting their lives. So Totally agree. And lastly, what would be a good lab science scenario for India going forward in cancer, speaking from your perspective? And would this be any different for other diseases such as other non communicable diseases or even infectious diseases?
The course of the diseases, especially the infectious diseases, as we are seeing for COVID-19, right? It's the same as, not same, but they follow the similar manner as the progression of cancer. They both are evolving diseases. So evolving in the same, cancer cells are fighting with the normal cells in the body, non-cancerous cell. Cancer cells are fighting for their survival when the patient is treated with drug, and they are changing themselves. Infectious diseases do the same thing. There is a fight, always the ongoing fight between how the infectious organism can bypass, eradication from the patient, right? Immune system or whatever system the patient is handling the infection. And also the second thing, when we are giving the drug or the vaccine, how the drug or vaccine is changing the disease itself, changing the infectious organism, changing the patient's immune system and everything, right? So they follow very similar principles. So we are so engrossed in building new drugs, building new vaccines. Of course, those are important. We fail to look into this particular aspect. That no matter what you are doing, you need to also look into how the drugs, how the vaccines are going to affect the patients in real life. And then only you can actually offer them better treatment. So developing drug, making sure the drug is at least to some extent not dangerous for the patient themselves is not enough. You have to again come back to the real life, to the real patient, take the lesson from them and go back and then change your drug or develop new drug or do whatever you want to do. That needs to be done for treating the diseases like cancer, infectious diseases, which follow very similar biological principles. For non-communicable diseases like diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, mental illness, it requires a lot of awareness spreading. So we do have a lot of awareness, but still there is a lack of it. I will give you a specific example. Women are as much as susceptible to heart attack, especially after the age of 50, 55 or 60 as men. But it is not taken seriously. How many of us seen that women are getting regular cholesterol screening, okay, or something else, or have blood pressure screening or something like that. So those awarenesses have to be there. And next thing, for mental diseases, still a lot of people think that if somebody has some problem, that is an indication of insanity. That has to go away. And all these diseases people have already established in very thorough way that all these diseases can be tracked back to something wrong or some changes at the genetic level. So again, personalized, right? Look at the family history. There is no, shame here. There is no shame to be, sick. It's nobody's fault if somebody has a family history. So that awareness has to be spread. We are doing so many things at the level of, so many different things like YouTube, apps, Twitter. Why not spreading the health awareness? So I think that needs to be there even for non-communicable diseases.
Yeah, that really reflects on how we need to perceive things differently. It's just a matter of how we look at it. Many of these non-communicable diseases are also called lifestyle diseases because of habits of people. So according to your research, do you think that there are certain habits of people which, if they change it, they're more likely to lead a healthier lifestyle and prevent these kinds of diseases?
Mm-hmm. Yes, as I said, It's most of the diseases, including cancer, are preventative. I mean, they are not 100%. If there is a family history or some, at the genetic level, something is problematic. But in most of the scenarios, especially the non-communicable diseases, those are preventative. People know that, if somebody's have diabetes running in the family, one should be, even if there is no genetic problem, maybe there is something wrong with the food habit. Sitting in front of the screen for days after days for very long time period is not also good. We already know that. But we are not doing much it's not that we are not doing it intentionally. It's sometimes the cultural system or, even the work environment are not allowing us to do it. So in a lot of places in US, like in Google, everybody knows this, right? People don't sit there. They roam around, they have gym, they have reward system and those kind of things. Companies need to do that. They need to spread more awareness. They need to, reward their employees for doing regular health screening. For government-controlled sectors, government needs to mandate it. Like, if you do this, you are going to get this rewarded, or if you do not do this, you will have some level of, disadvantage. So that has to be there. So the awareness has to be spread to prevent this non-communicable as well as communicable disease. So, a lot of places here to stop spreading COVID. You are mandated to have your vaccines done. You are mandated to have your, mask wear. So if we can do that, why not? You are mandated to have your annual health checkup done. You are mandated to have to attend certain awareness program, right? So why not? It doesn't cost much. If we start doing it, it actually saves a lot of money rather than, in the long run, rather than, waiting for the last moment and, letting the bomb drop.
Yeah, I think that does really make a lot of sense, and people should actually work towards bettering their lifestyles as well. And any last thoughts which you would have before we wrap up the discussion?
So just to wrap up, I believe that there is no lack of good science in India. A lot of people are doing good science. So it's just we need to change our, goal, the perspective. We have forgotten that we owe it to the patients. I'm talking about cancer care. We owe it to the patients to show them, no matter how small it is, to give them some comfort during the course of their journey, because, cancer is a very widespread disease. So it impacts almost all families. So as scientists, some people hold very big respects for the scientific community. So just to give them back, we owe them to do good, so that we can do good science and, give them something back in return. And the doctor, the industry, the drug developer, the government, the researcher, the patients, some level of communication need to be there. Okay. So at the end of the day, we all have to remember that all we are doing, all this money are being spent, all this publicity are being, spread. This is just to provide better care for the people who are suffering, right? So we should not forget that aspect of the research or of the, funding or anything, or drug developing.
Thank you, Dr. Chakrabarty, for giving your time today, and hopefully even this conversation could help in spreading more awareness, and we'll try that it helps bringing about a change.
Thanks a lot. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And as I said, we should not lose our faith on good science. And if we think of how it is going to affect the patients who are suffering, then we probably will keep doing the science in a really, desirable manner.
you for listening to the ICCA India Podcast. Do follow our social media handles and stay tuned for the next episode.